Are you qualified to be a Tucson landlord? The 10-question quiz. Hi, Steve Schultz here from Blue Fox Properties. Let's jump right into number one. So per the Arizona Residential Landlord Tenant Act, what are the only ways to legally serve a notice? The answer is actually personal service or certified or registered mail. They lump together certified and registered mail as one, so they say there are only two ways, that combined with, again, personal service. So what is personal service? That is when literally you actually hand the notice to the tenant. And so those are the only two ways. Now, really important to understand what's commonly done here in Tucson specifically, and I think throughout the state, is in a lot of multifamily communities, they will actually post notices on the front door of the unit. That is actually does not legally serve as notice. And so although it's done commonly, it doesn't serve as legal notice. Also, posting a notice on the garage door, also again, not legal service. A common question that comes up too is, well, what if I text or email or leave a voicemail? Does that count as legal service? And again, the answer is no. Now, the caveat to those things are if the tenant actually responds, then that indeed does serve as proper notice because they have acknowledged that they received it and they responded to it. The Residential Landlord Tenant Act, there are only the two ways. Number two, how many days after the tenant surrenders possession and the lease has expired does a landlord have to send a security deposit disposition to the tenant? So first of all, let's address what the heck is a security deposit disposition. So what that is very simply, it's just an accounting for the security deposit. How much or what was charged to the security deposit, and then what was returned to the tenant of their security deposit. So there could be no charges, there could be a lot of charges, there could be more charges than the actual security deposit amount. So that is what is called the security deposit disposition. Now, back to the question, how many days after the tenant surrenders possession and the lease is expired does a landlord have to send that? And so the answer is 14 business days as opposed to calendar days. So that is actually defined in, again, the Arizona Residential Landlord Tenant Act. And so it is those 14 days. Now, based on my experience in talking to property managers all around the country, that is the shortest time frame I've ever heard of. I've never actually done the research to find out if that is indeed across all the states the shortest, but it's the shortest one I've heard, so I believe it is. But nonetheless, it is a very short time frame. And so something that once the tenant moves out, you need to act very quickly to get the property turned over, get it ready to rent again. By the way, don't forget to subscribe for more landlord tips like this, and feel free to contact us if you might be interested in having us manage your Tucson rental house. So let's continue on to number three. What is the maximum amount of pet deposit you can charge for an emotional support animal? All right, so did I get you? This is a trick question. The answer is actually zero. You cannot charge a pet deposit for an emotional support animal because by definition, legally, if it is a legitimate emotional support animal, a pet deposit cannot be charged for that animal because it is not a pet. All right, number four, what is the total maximum amount you can charge for a security deposit in Arizona? So the answer to this question is it's 1.5 times the rental amount. So let's take a simple example. Let's assume the rent amount is $1,000 per month. So in that example, $1,500 would be the maximum amount of security deposit you can charge. So let's take an example where let's say you set the security deposit at, let's say $1,400, and you had a pet deposit, which by the way, I don't recommend doing pet deposits for a number of reasons. That's for another video. But you had a pet deposit for $400, right? So $1,300 plus $400 and $1,700, that would take you over that $1,500 limit. So you would have to stay within that. So $1,500 would be the most you could collect in security deposit in total. So one of the things to realize here too is fees in the state of Arizona are separate, and those are not limited here in the state of Arizona. So if you had that, instead of a pet deposit, you had a $300 pet fee, now that is outside of the security deposit amount. So you could indeed charge that $300 fee in addition to that $1,300 security deposit and still be good. So that's part of that too, to understand the difference between security deposits and fees. Very important here in the state of Arizona. All right, number five, if properly documented, can you refuse an emotional support animal if you have a no pets policy? And so here again, the answer is no, because remember, an emotional support animal by legal definition is not a pet. Therefore, even if you have a no pets policy, you have to allow that emotional support animal. Now, something that has come up in the past along these lines is, let's say at the property you say absolutely no pit bulls, and so that is part of your pet policy, is maybe you accept pets but no pit bulls, and lo and behold, an emotional support animal is a pit bull and has proper documentation and is determined to be legitimate. Can you refuse that pit bull because you have that policy? Again, the answer is no, you can't. You have to accept that animal because it is an emotional support animal and thereby not a pet. All right, number 6, how much education do you take annually to keep up with legislative and other changes in the residential property management field? You know, your answer might be none. I'm not doing anything, right? Very, very dangerous for you to be in that situation. You know, maybe it's more. I hope it's more. I hope you're doing a lot with education if you are planning to self-manage. So in the state of Arizona, to be a licensed real estate agent, one of the requirements is you have to do 24 hours of continuing education every 2 years. Now, in our case, as licensees, that can take the form, typically, most of the classes offered are under the category of sales as opposed to property management. So sometimes it's tough to find property management classes that are specific to property management. So very challenging to find it specifically in this area. So what we do here at our firm is we actually require every person in our firm, whether licensed or not, to do 24 hours of continuing education every year, property management specific. So we are big believers in keeping up with what the changes are, what's happening, what's new, and just keeping ourselves educated. And I recommend you do the same if it's something you are considering doing self-management. All right, number 7, if you want to evict a tenant for non-payment of a rent, what is the first step you must take after they haven't paid the rent to initiate the eviction process? And if you said serve the 5-day notice to pay or quit, you are correct. And so that is actually the legal name of the document, the 5-day notice to pay or quit, and that is a first step of the eviction process. So you have to send that out, and then it gives them those 5 days to pay or quit. And again, following the 2 legal ways to serve the notice, either personal service or certified or registered mail, is how you need to make sure that is delivered or sent. All right, number 8, what are the 7 federally protected classes as they relate to fair housing? All right, let me give you a second, get the wheels spinning in your head here. All right, so here they are: race, color, national origin, religion, sex, familial status, and disability. So those are the 7. So you want to make sure you're protecting yourself and complying with all the fair housing laws. Now, where this usually comes up in our business as it relates to property management and rentals is usually on the front end on applications and that application process. So for example, you would be violating fair housing if you said, hey, we're not going to rent to any people from Ecuador, right? That are originally from Ecuador. We are not going to rent to anybody originally from Ecuador. Well, that would be a violation of fair housing. Why? Because of national origin. Similarly, let's say you put out in your marketing for the rental of, we are not going to rent to anybody that is Catholic, right? I've decided we're not going to rent to Catholics and we don't want to do that, so we're not going to do that. Again, another violation of fair housing. Why? Because of religion. So that's the idea. So in both the application process and in your marketing for that property, that's usually where that comes up. All right, number 9, what are the additional Tucson protected classes as it relates to fair housing? Now, we just talked about federally, those are federal on the federal level. Now, let's talk about Tucson specific, city of Tucson. And so there are additional ones. There are age, ancestry, sexual orientation, gender identity, marital status, and the newest one is source of income. And source of income is targeted at making sure landlords allow what's called Section 8. Section 8 is a government program where the government will pay up to the full amount of the rent. And so there are a lot of landlords that don't like Section 8 for a lot of reasons. Again, that's another video as well as to why that is the case. But in terms of the city of Tucson, if somebody says, hey, I have a housing voucher, Section 8, in the city of Tucson, if your property is located in the city of Tucson, you have to consider that. Now, you don't have to change your rental criteria. Your rental criteria still applies, but you do have to consider renting the house to them and letting them apply for the house and processing them using your rental criteria. And last but not least, number 10, do you have a reliable network of licensed, insured contractors for plumbing, HVAC, electrical, roofing, and for cleaning, carpet cleaning, and any other contractors that may be needed? So you want to make sure you have this pool of people ready to go because you never know when the next maintenance item is going to pop up and you need them. So make sure you do all that screening on the front end. You have that all laid out, prepared, good to go. You've gone through that. You've qualified those vendors. You make sure they have the proper licensing, insurance, all that type of stuff so that when the problem does pop up, you're ready to go. All right, so those are the 10 questions. If you know all the answers to these questions, you might be on the right path to manage managing your rental effectively without getting yourself in trouble. If you struggled with many of these, I recommend one of two courses of action. Number one, educate yourself so you can tackle the task of self-management, or two, hire a professional property manager. I hope this quiz helps you. Don't forget to subscribe below, and I'll see you on the next video.